Thank you so much, Chairman Engel, for your leadership for human rights on this issue, on so many issues, as the leader of our committee, and for the very strong words that you just delivered on this important legislation, the Hong Kong People's Freedom and Choice Act. I want to thank the bipartisan sponsors, Representatives Kinzinger, Castro, and Curtis. I want to thank Ranking Member McCall and leadership on both sides of the aisle for making the issue of Hong Kong and our efforts to provide safe haven for its people a bipartisan issue. As you mentioned, the China Task Force that you chaired recommended an approach very similar to the one that we will be embracing here today. And I think the reason why we are united on this issue is that although we may sometimes use different language, we do have a common understanding of the challenge that the United States faces with respect to China. We understand that we are in a contest, not with China, the country, not with the Chinese people, but with the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party. It's a contest of ideas and of ideals. It's about the most fundamental questions, how the world should be organized, whether there are any rules that apply to the most powerful nations and the most powerful governments, or whether those nations and governments can impose their will on anyone as they choose. A contest between democracy and kleptocracy. And it's a contest that we win, in my view, by remembering what we stand for as a country, by staying true to that, by winning allies to that, by rallying hearts and minds around the world to that. And so with that in mind, I'd like to make just 2 points that are relevant to this bill. Number one, Hong Kong is very important to this contest. It is a city on the front lines, geographically and morally, just like Berlin was during the Cold War. And it's a place where the Chinese government made a promise to respect the autonomy of Hong Kong, to respect the freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, the rule of law that people enjoyed there. China today is plainly breaking those promises, and by breaking them, it is testing us, because those promises were made not just to the people of Hong Kong, but to the United States and to the international community. It is testing to see whether we will do something, and therefore we must. The second point I'll make is that we know something as a country about how to win a contest like this because we waged one during the Cold War, and we've learned lessons about what to do and what not to do. And one of those lessons is that the best way to win against a dictatorship is to pit the strength of our system against the weakness of theirs. To hold up the glaring contrast between our free, open, and self-confident democracy against the weakness of the oppressive, closed, and fearful system that the Communist Party has imposed on the Chinese people, including now in Hong Kong. And one way we do that is by self-confidently opening our doors. That's what we did during the Cold War. Hundreds of thousands of people from the former Soviet Union, including 400,000 religious refugees from the former Soviet Union itself, and many, many more from Hungary, from Poland, my family, for example, Czechoslovakia, and others, came to the United States over the decades. They were, yes, they were dissidents, sometimes they were protesters, sometimes they were political, but mostly they were the people with open and inquiring minds, the risk takers, the entrepreneurs, the scientists, the artists, the best and brightest. And the Soviet bloc's loss was our gain. They made us stronger. And their success here was a constant reproach to the communist regimes they left behind, a constant reminder to the people still trapped behind the Iron Curtain that there is a better way to live than in a dictatorship. So that's what we're doing in this bill. We're saying that we are willing to provide temporary refuge to Hong Kongers who are already in the United States, to expedite processing of refugee applications for Hong Kongers fleeing persecution. And we call for a strategy to work with our allies, because the United States obviously cannot do this by itself, but we can lead this effort. We are saying, by passing this legislation, something very, very important to the Chinese government. We're saying if you crush Hong Kong, you will lose its best and brightest citizens, the people responsible for its vitality, for we will let them come to the United States and contribute to our vitality instead. So it's a humanitarian gesture, but it's actually much more than a humanitarian gesture. It's one of the best ways we have to deter China from crushing Hong Kong. The Chinese government understands perfectly well that this is a threat. When the United Kingdom offered asylum and citizenship to Hong Kongers earlier this year, they said it was a gross interference and they condemned it. So,
gentlemen, 2 more minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for an additional 2 minutes.
I won't need it all. They condemned Canada for doing exactly the same thing a few months ago. And I don't believe they expect us to do it. They surely expect us to condemn them. They surely expect us to slap a few sanctions on their leadership, as the State Department did today, which I'm fine with. But they do not expect us to use the strength of our society against the weakness of theirs by opening our doors to Hong Kongers fleeing persecution, giving them that option that is being denied to them in Hong Kong itself. So, let's stand by the brave people of Hong Kong. Let's make the Chinese Communist Party uncomfortable, as this surely will, and let's do it in the best traditions of America's openness to people seeking freedom from oppression around the world. Thank you so much, and I yield back.